Unaware that his pregnant wife is the daughter of a secret trillionaire who recently died, he lets his mistress humiliate his wife and their twins at a Christmas party, until he sees the guest list. 5 years after Evelyn Carter gave away $500 billion to cleanse her dead father's empire and won full custody of her children, she received a phone call at 3 in the morning that made her question whether anything in her entire life had been real. The voice on the other end was calm, measured, and absolutely impossible. It was her father, William Hayes, the man whose death certificate she'd signed, whose estate she'd inherited, whose grave she'd visited dozens of times trying to make peace with a parent who'd abandoned her. He wasn't dead. He'd never been dead. And every single thing that had happened to her since that Christmas party 5 years ago, every revelation, every choice, every moment she thought she was finally becoming her own person, had been orchestrated by a man who'd been watching from the shadows, testing her, shaping her, controlling her life even more completely than her ex-husband, Mark, ever had. But William Hayes wasn't calling to apologize or explain or ask for forgiveness. He was calling because the people he'd betrayed to build his empire, the arms dealers and corrupt politicians and criminals who'd made him $2.3 trillion, had just figured out he was alive, and they'd taken something that would force him out of hiding. They'd kidnapped Evelyn's 5-year-old daughter, Catherine, from her bedroom while Evelyn slept down the hall, leaving nothing but a note that said, "Tell your father he has 72 hours to turn himself in or we kill his granddaughter. The sins of the father end with the blood of the child." Evelyn Carter had spent 5 years learning to be powerful, learning to run an empire, learning to make senators nervous and CEOs apologize and corrupt systems crumble with a single phone call. She'd testified before Congress. She'd dismantled her father's dirty investments. She'd become the woman who never stayed silent, who never accepted cruelty, who protected her children with a ruthlessness that came from finally understanding her own worth. But none of that power, none of that transformation, none of those hard-won victories meant anything when her baby girl was gone. And the only person who could help her get Catherine back was the father who'd made her believe he was dead, so he could turn her entire life into a test she didn't know she was taking. Noah was 12 now, old enough to understand that his little sister was in danger, young enough to still have nightmares about the night daddy let the pretty lady be mean to mommy. Lily was 12 too, sharp and skeptical and angry in a way that came from watching her mother give away billions while other kids' parents fought over child support. They'd grown up with security guards and Senate hearings and a mother who was powerful, but never really present, always fixing the world her grandfather broke, but rarely just sitting on the floor playing with them the way she used to when they were small and poor and invisible. And now Catherine, the baby who'd never known poverty or humiliation or what it felt like to be made small, was somewhere in the dark with people who killed for a living. Because her grandfather had loved his daughter so much, he'd faked his own death to teach her a lesson. William Hayes had orchestrated everything. The Christmas party where Mark humiliated Evelyn wasn't random timing. It was planned. The guest list full of people who answered to William wasn't coincidence. It was theater. The lawyer, Daniel Rowe, who'd been Evelyn's guide and protector and the man she'd fallen in love with over 5 years, wasn't just her father's executive. He was her father's spy, reporting every decision back to the man who'd been watching from New Zealand, measuring whether his daughter would use power with integrity or become corrupted by it. The custody battle, the press conferences, the Senate testimonies, the billions she'd given away. Every choice she thought was hers had been observed, evaluated, graded by a father who believed love meant control and protection meant manipulation. And now that father, dying of real cancer this time with 6 months left to live, wanted to meet his daughter for the first time since she was 18 and standing across the street at her high school graduation watching a stranger watch her. He wanted to explain. He wanted her to understand that everything he'd done, the abandonment and the secrets and the elaborate theater of his fake death, had been to keep her safe from the very people who now had her child. He wanted forgiveness. But Evelyn didn't want to give him understanding or forgiveness or anything except her daughter back alive. And she didn't care if that meant working with the man who'd turned her entire life into an experiment or burning down everything he'd built to get Catherine home. Mark Carter, her ex-husband who'd let his mistress humiliate her 5 years ago, who'd tried to steal custody and gone on national television playing victim, had changed in ways Evelyn never expected. He was remarried now to a kind woman named Rachel, lived in a modest house, worked a normal job, and saw Noah and Lily every weekend without drama or lawyers or supervised visits. He'd become the father he should have been, the man who finally understood that his children didn't need him to be impressive. They needed him to be present. When Evelyn called him at 3:15 a.m., voice shaking, telling him Catherine was gone, Mark didn't hesitate. He said 5 words that reminded her why she'd loved him once before ambition had turned him cruel. Tell me what you need. What Evelyn needed was impossible. She needed to trust a father who'd manipulated her entire adult life. She needed to work with Daniel Rowe, the man she loved, who'd been lying to her for 5 years about who he really answered to. She needed to become the kind of person who could negotiate with killers and arms dealers and people who saw a 5-year-old girl as leverage instead of a human being. She needed to be cold enough to do what was necessary, but human enough not to lose herself in the process. And she needed to do all of it in 72 hours because after that, the people who'd taken Catherine had promised to send pieces of her back until William Hayes turned himself in. Evelyn stood in Catherine's bedroom at 3:30 a.m. The room still smelling like the lavender spray Rachel had given them, the nightlight still glowing in the shape of a dinosaur because Catherine was obsessed with anything prehistoric. The stuffed triceratops Catherine couldn't sleep without was still on the bed. That meant she'd been taken while she was already asleep, carried out without even waking up enough to grab her favorite toy. Evelyn's hands shook as she held the dinosaur, pressing it against her chest like she could somehow transfer her heartbeat through the fabric and Catherine would feel it wherever she was and know Mommy was coming. Federal agents were everywhere. FBI because kidnapping crossed state lines, Homeland Security because William Hayes's enemies were international, local police because they had to be involved even though everyone knew they were useless against people who could disappear a child from a house with a $10 million security system without leaving a trace. They were dusting for prints, reviewing footage, asking Evelyn questions she couldn't answer because her mind kept going to one place. Catherine waking up in the dark, Catherine realizing Mommy wasn't there. Catherine being scared and alone and 5 years old, and not understanding why the people holding her looked at her like she wasn't human. Daniel Rowe walked into the bedroom and Evelyn turned on him so fast he actually stepped back. His silver hair was messy, his suit jacket missing, his tie loosened, and for the first time in 5 years he looked rattled. "Evelyn," he started. She cut him off, her voice like broken glass. "Don't say my name like you know me. Don't pretend you've been on my side. You've been reporting to him this whole time. Every decision I made, every choice, every moment I thought I was finally free. You were telling him, grading me like I was his science experiment." Daniel's face crumpled. "It wasn't like that." "Yes, it was," Evelyn said, her voice shaking. "He's been alive. You knew. You helped him fake his death. You delivered his manipulation like it was my inheritance. And you watched me fall in love with you knowing you were lying every single day." Daniel reached for her and she stepped back. "Don't touch me. Just tell me how to get my daughter back." He dropped his hand. His voice was hoarse when he spoke. "Your father has a location. He's been tracking his enemies for years. He knows where they operate, how they move, what they want. He can help you find her." Evelyn's laugh was bitter. "How generous. The man who got her kidnapped is offering to help rescue her." Daniel's jaw tightened. "He didn't want this. He's dying, Evelyn. Real cancer this time. He has maybe 4 months left. He stayed hidden to keep you safe. And now that they found him anyway, he wants to fix it before he's gone." Evelyn felt tears burning, but she refused to let them fall. "Where is he?" "On a plane. He'll be here in 6 hours." Evelyn looked at the clock. That would make it 9:30 a.m. 48 hours left of the 72. She turned back to Daniel. "And you? Where do you stand in all this? Are you his man or mine?" Daniel's eyes were red, exhausted, full of something that looked like grief. "I fell in love with you, Evelyn. That wasn't part of his plan. That wasn't something I reported. I broke protocol the day I realized I cared more about protecting you from him than protecting his experiment. I've been lying to him for the last year, telling him you're colder than you are, more ruthless, because I didn't want him to think you'd passed his test. I wanted him to leave you alone." His voice cracked. And now Catherine's gone because I failed to protect all of you. Evelyn stared at him. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to scream at him. She wanted to collapse against him and let someone else be strong for 5 minutes. But she couldn't afford any of that. So she just said, "Then help me now. No more lies. No more loyalty to him. You're either with me or you're gone." Daniel nodded immediately. "I'm with you. Always." Mark arrived 20 minutes later with Rachel. They came through the front door past the agents, and Noah and Lily ran to their father like they were 6 again, and he was still the person who could fix everything. Mark held them both, his eyes finding Evelyn over their heads. The look that passed between them was complicated. Shared history, shared children, shared terror. Rachel hung back, respectful, kind, not inserting herself where she didn't belong. Evelyn felt a flash of gratitude for this woman who'd married her ex-husband and helped him become decent again. Mark approached her slowly. "What do you need?" he asked again. Evelyn's voice was steady. "I need you to take Noah and Lily somewhere safe. Your house, a hotel, anywhere that isn't here. I need them protected while I deal with this." Mark nodded. "Done. And what else?" Evelyn looked at him. "And I need you to not ask questions. I need you to trust that I'm going to do whatever it takes to bring her home. And some of it won't be legal or moral or anything you'd approve of. Can you do that?" Mark didn't hesitate. "Yes, bring her home, Evelyn. Whatever it takes." Evelyn felt something crack in her chest. "Thank you." Mark reached out carefully and squeezed her shoulder once. "She's my daughter, too. I wasn't there for Noah and Lily when they needed me, but I'm here now. Use me however you need." Then he turned to gather the twins, and within 15 minutes they were gone. The house quieter, emptier. The weight of Catherine's absence pressing down like a physical thing. At 9:47 a.m., a black car pulled up to Evelyn's house. The federal agents stiffened, hands moving toward weapons, but Daniel stepped forward. "It's him. Let him through." The car door opened and a man got out slowly, carefully, like his bones hurt. He was 73, but looked older, thinner. His expensive suit hanging loose on a frame that had been strong once but was being eaten from the inside by cancer. His hair was white, his face lined, but his eyes were the same eyes Evelyn had seen in the photograph her mother kept. The same eyes that had watched her from across the street at her graduation. William Hayes walked toward his daughter for the first time in 14 years, and Evelyn stood frozen on her front steps, unable to move, unable to breathe, unable to process that the ghost she'd been grieving was flesh and bone and dying and real. He stopped 10 feet away, close enough to see her clearly, far enough to give her space. His voice when he spoke was exactly like it had been on the phone, calm, measured, carrying the weight of decades of secrets. "Hello, Evelyn." She stared at him, her hands clenched into fists. Her voice came out as a whisper. "You're real." "I'm real," he confirmed. "And I'm sorry." "Sorry," Evelyn repeated. The word tasted like ash. "You faked your death. You turned my life into a test. You manipulated everything from the shadows. And now my daughter is gone because of enemies you made, and you're sorry." William didn't flinch. "Yes, all of that is true, and none of my reasons will matter to you right now. So I won't insult you by explaining. I'll just help you get Catherine back. Then you can decide what you want to do with me." Evelyn wanted to scream. She wanted to hit him. She wanted to collapse. Instead, she said the only thing that mattered. "Do you know where she is?" William nodded. "I have an idea. The people who took her are called the Dalton Syndicate. I helped them move weapons 15 years ago, then testified against them anonymously to take down their competition. They've wanted me dead ever since. They found out I was alive 3 days ago. They've been planning this." He looked at her. "They won't kill her. Not yet. She's only valuable alive. That's supposed to comfort me?" Evelyn's voice shook. William's expression didn't change. "No, it's supposed to give you hope. Because if she's alive, we can get her back. I know how they think. I know how they operate. And I know that they'll negotiate." Evelyn stepped closer. "For what? What do they want?" William met her eyes. Me. They want me to turn myself in. They want to kill me publicly, make an example, show the world what happens when you betray the Dalton Syndicate. Evelyn's voice was ice. Then do it. Turn yourself in. Trade yourself for her. William shook his head slowly. It doesn't work that way. They'll kill me and keep her or kill us both. The only way to get Catherine back safely is to take her back by force, with precision, and with help from people who know how to fight wars the government doesn't acknowledge exist. Evelyn felt the world tilt. You're talking about hiring mercenaries, soldiers, killers. William nodded. I'm talking about using every resource I have left to save my granddaughter. Even if it means burning down everything I built, even if it means exposing myself to every government that wants me arrested, even if it means I die in the process. His voice dropped. I failed you, Evelyn. I abandoned you to keep you safe. And in doing so, I made your life a lie. I can't undo that. But I can do this. Let me help you save her. Evelyn looked at the man who was her father. The man who'd built empires in shadows, who'd loved her from so far away it looked like abandonment. The man who was dying and wanted forgiveness she didn't know if she could give. And she made a choice that had nothing to do with forgiveness and everything to do with Catherine. Fine, help me. But when this is over, when she's safe, you and I are going to have a very different conversation. William nodded. I wouldn't expect anything else. The war room William Hayes set up in Evelyn's basement looked like something from a spy movie. Screens everywhere showing satellite imagery, heat signatures, intercepted communications. A table covered in maps and photographs and documents that made Evelyn's stomach turn. Pictures of the Dalton Syndicate's known operatives. Men with dead eyes and long records of things the official reports called alleged, but everyone knew were true. Torture, execution, disappearances that never got solved because no one wanted to look too closely at where the bodies might be buried. William stood at the head of the table, moving with purpose despite the cancer eating through him, and explained the situation like he was briefing soldiers instead of talking to his daughter about rescuing her 5-year-old. The Dalton Syndicate operates out of a compound 70 miles north of here, an abandoned industrial complex they've owned through shell companies for a decade. They have 12 core members, another 30 or so contractors they bring in for specific jobs. Security is extensive guards, cameras, reinforced structures, but they're arrogant. They think no one's coming for them because no one's been stupid enough to try. Evelyn's voice was tight. You're saying we need to raid a fortified compound full of armed criminals to get my daughter back? William looked at her. I'm saying we need to do it smart, fast, with people who know what they're doing. He gestured to 3 men standing against the wall, silent until now. These are associates of mine, former special forces. They've worked in situations like this before. One of the men stepped forward. His name tag said Kessler. He was maybe 45, built like someone who'd spent his life training for violence, with a scar across his jaw that looked like it had a story Evelyn didn't want to hear. Kessler's voice was professional, detached. We've been surveilling the compound for the last 6 hours. We've identified where they're likely holding the girl, 2nd floor, northwest corner, room with a window that faces the tree line. 2 guards posted outside the door, rotating every 4 hours. The good news is they're being careful with her. She's valuable. The bad news is that means extraction is going to be complicated. We can't just blow the place up and grab her. We need precision. Evelyn felt like she was going to be sick. You're talking about a military operation. Kessler nodded. Yes, ma'am. And we have about 36 hours left to plan and execute it before their deadline expires. William leaned forward. Evelyn, I know this is overwhelming, but these men are the best at what they do. They've extracted hostages from worse situations. They can get Catherine out alive. Can they? Evelyn's voice broke. Can they guarantee it? Because I can't lose her. I can't bury my daughter because you made enemies who use children as weapons. The room went silent. William's face showed the first real crack in his composure. No one can guarantee anything. But I promise you, I will do everything in my power to bring her home. And if that means I die in the process, then that's the price I pay. Daniel spoke up from the corner where he'd been standing. There's another option. We negotiate. Offer them something they want more than revenge. Money, information, access to accounts they think are locked. The Dalton Syndicate isn't ideological. They're mercenaries. Everything has a price. William shook his head. We already tried. They refused. They want me and they want it public. They want every other enemy I made to see what happens when you cross them. Mark's voice came from the doorway, startling everyone. Then give them what they want. He walked in slowly, hands visible, non-threatening. Rachel had dropped him off and taken the twins to a hotel 3 towns over. But Mark had come back. Evelyn looked at him. What are you talking about? Mark looked at William. You want to trade yourself? Fine. Make the trade, but make it on your terms, not theirs. Set the meet somewhere you control, somewhere Kessler and his team can position for a rescue the second Catherine is visible. Use yourself as bait, but don't actually give them the satisfaction of killing you. William studied Mark with something that might have been respect. That's tactically sound, but risky. If they smell the trap, they kill her immediately. Mark nodded. Then make it convincing. Go in wired, unarmed, alone. Show them you're cooperating. The second they bring Catherine out to prove she's alive, the team moves. It's a window of maybe 30 seconds, but it's better than trying to raid a fortified compound blind. Kessler was nodding slowly. It could work. We'd need perfect positioning, perfect timing, and we'd need Hayes to survive long enough after they grab him for us to extract both him and the girl. William coughed, a wet sound that made everyone wince. I'm dying anyway, for months if I'm lucky. If using my death to save my granddaughter is how I go out, I'll take it. No, Evelyn said sharply. Everyone turned to look at her. She was shaking, but her voice was firm. No, you don't get to martyr yourself and call it redemption. You don't get to die saving her and make me spend the rest of my life wondering if I should be grateful or furious. We do this clean. We get Catherine out and you survive, and then you face what you did to me and my mother and everyone else you manipulated in the name of protection. William looked at his daughter for a long moment. Then he nodded. All right. We do it your way. We get her out, and I answer for everything after. Evelyn turned to Kessler. How long do you need to set this up? Kessler checked his watch. If we move now, we can be in position by nightfall. We'll need Hayes to make contact with the syndicate, propose the trade, set the meeting for tomorrow morning early, when they're tired, when their guard is lower, and we'll need every piece of intel you have on their personnel, their weapons, their protocols. William pulled out a tablet and started transferring files. I have everything. 20 years of intelligence on the Dalton Syndicate. Names, photos, communication patterns, financial records. I kept it all as insurance. Now we use it to take them down. Daniel moved beside Evelyn and spoke quietly. You don't have to be there tomorrow. Let the team handle it. Stay somewhere safe. Evelyn looked at him like he'd lost his mind. My daughter's in a room with people who kill for a living, and you think I'm going to sit in a safe house drinking coffee while someone else rescues her? I'm going. I'm going to be there when she comes out, and she's going to see my face and know I came for her. Daniel started to argue, but Mark cut him off. Let her go. If it were Noah or Lily, would you stay behind? Daniel closed his mouth. Mark looked at Evelyn. I'm coming too. Evelyn started to shake her head, but Mark held up a hand. Not to fight, not to be a hero, but to be there because she's my daughter too, and I already missed enough of her life. I'm not missing this. The next 12 hours were a blur of preparation that felt surreal. Kessler's team ran through scenarios, showed Evelyn and Mark how to stay low, how to move if things went wrong, how to recognize the signal that meant run. William made contact with the Dalton Syndicate through encrypted channels, proposed the trade, set the location at an abandoned quarry 40 minutes north, neutral ground, open space, nowhere to hide, which was exactly what made it perfect for snipers positioned in the surrounding hills. At 11 p.m., Evelyn found herself standing in Catherine's room again, unable to sleep, unable to stop her mind from running through every possible way this could go wrong. Daniel found her there. He didn't say anything, just stood beside her in the dark. After a long silence, Evelyn spoke. If this goes bad tomorrow, if something happens to me, promise me you'll make sure Noah and Lily know I love them, that everything I did, even the mistakes, was because I was trying to protect them. Daniel's voice was rough. Nothing's going to happen to you. You're going to get Catherine back. And you're all going to be fine. Evelyn turned to look at him. You can't promise that. No, he admitted. But I can promise I'll die before I let anything happen to you or those kids. Evelyn felt tears finally break through. I don't know if I can forgive you for lying, for being his spy, for making me fall in love with you while you were reporting everything back to him. Daniel's hand found hers in the dark. I know, and I don't deserve forgiveness. But I love you, Evelyn. That was never a lie. That was never part of his plan. That was just me falling for a woman who's stronger and braver and better than anyone I've ever known. She squeezed his hand once, then let go. Then help me bring my daughter home. After that, we'll figure out the rest. At 4 a.m. they left in 3 vehicles. Kessler's team in one, weapons and equipment. Evelyn tried not to look at too closely. William in another, looking pale and tired but determined, and Evelyn, Mark, and Daniel in the third, following at a distance, staying back until the signal came. The quarry was exactly as William had described. Open pit, water at the bottom, access roads on 3 sides. The sun was just starting to rise when they arrived, everything gray and cold and quiet. William walked out into the center of the quarry alone. He'd been fitted with a wire so thin it was invisible, a tracker embedded under his skin in case they moved him. Kessler and his team were positioned in the hills, invisible, waiting. Evelyn and Mark were a quarter-mile back. Watching through binoculars, every muscle in Evelyn's body coiled tight enough to snap. At 6:43 a.m., 3 black SUVs rolled up, doors opened. 8 men got out, heavily armed, moving with military precision. And then a 9th person emerged, small, confused, wearing pink pajamas and holding a blanket. Catherine. Evelyn's breath stopped. Mark grabbed her arm. Not yet. Wait for the signal. Evelyn's hands shook so badly the binoculars rattled. One of the men, tall, bald, with a scar that split his face in half, walked forward to meet William. His voice carried across the quarry. William Hayes, the ghost himself. We've been looking for you for a long time. William's voice was calm. I'm here. Let the girl go and you can have me. The man laughed. That's not how this works. You think we're stupid? You think we didn't see your people in the hills? This is a setup. William didn't move. Of course it's a setup. Did you expect me to walk in here defenseless? But I'm still here, and you still have what I want. So let's make this simple. You let her go, I stay. And nobody has to die today. The man considered this. Then he pulled out a gun and pointed it at Catherine's head. Or, he said casually, I kill her right now and then hunt down everyone you've ever cared about, starting with your daughter. The real one, the woman who thinks she's so powerful now. Evelyn felt the world slow down. She watched William's face change, watched him calculate angles and odds and risks, watched him make a decision. And then William Hayes did something Evelyn never expected. He smiled. You're right, he said. This is a setup, and you just walked right into it. The signal came, a flash of light from the hills, and then everything happened at once. Kessler's team opened fire, suppressing shots that sent the Dalton Syndicate men diving for cover. William lunged forward toward Catherine. The man with the scar spun, gun coming up, and fired. The shot caught William in the chest. He went down hard, but in falling, he'd put himself between Catherine and the gunfire. Evelyn was running before she knew she'd moved. Mark was right behind her, both of them sprinting across the quarry toward the chaos. Daniel was shouting something behind them, but Evelyn couldn't hear it over the sound of her own heartbeat. Kessler's team moved down from the hills like ghosts, precise, lethal, dropping the Syndicate men one by one. And in the center of it all, Catherine stood frozen, eyes wide with terror, not understanding why there was so much noise and why Grandpa, the man she'd never met but somehow recognized, was bleeding on the ground in front of her. Evelyn reached her daughter and scooped her up, Catherine's small body trembling, and turned to run. Mark was there beside her, shielding them with his body, moving them back toward cover. Behind them, Kessler put 2 rounds in the scarred man's chest, and the shooting stopped. The whole thing had taken 90 seconds that felt like a lifetime. Evelyn collapsed behind one of the vehicles, holding Catherine so tight she was probably hurting her. But Catherine was clinging just as hard, sobbing into her mother's neck. "Mommy, mommy, mommy." Over and over like a prayer. Mark was checking them both for injuries, his hands shaking. "Are you hurt? Is she hurt?" Evelyn couldn't speak. She just shook her head, tears streaming down her face, holding her daughter and feeling her breathe in and her heartbeat and knowing she was alive. Daniel appeared, his face white, and pointed back toward the center of the quarry. "William, he's down." Evelyn looked up. Kessler was kneeling beside William, applying pressure to the chest wound. But there was so much blood. Too much blood. Evelyn looked at Catherine's face, her baby's eyes red from crying, and made a choice. "Mark, take her. Get her out of here." Mark nodded immediately, taking Catherine gently. She reached for Evelyn. "No, Mommy, don't go." Evelyn kissed her forehead. "I'll be right back, baby. Promise. Daddy's going to keep you safe." Then she stood and walked back toward the man who'd given her life, abandoned her, manipulated her, and just taken a bullet meant for her daughter. William Hayes was dying. Not from the cancer that had been eating through him slowly, giving him months, but from the bullet that had torn through his chest, giving him minutes. Evelyn knelt beside him in the dirt of the quarry, her hands covered in his blood, and for the first time in her life looked into her father's eyes without a street between them or years of silence, making him a stranger. He was struggling to breathe, each inhale wet and labored, his face gray beneath the tan he'd gotten living in New Zealand, pretending to be dead while his daughter rebuilt the empire he'd left her. Kessler was working fast, field dressing the wound, but even Evelyn could see it was too late. The blood wasn't slowing down. William's hand found hers, his grip surprisingly strong for a man bleeding out. "Evelyn," he managed, his voice barely above a whisper. "She's safe." Evelyn nodded, tears streaming down her face without permission. "She's safe. You saved her." William's smile was small, pained. "Then it was worth it." Evelyn wanted to scream at him, wanted to tell him nothing was worth this, that she'd spent 32 years without him, and now that he was finally real and present and here, she was going to lose him again in a way that was permanent and irreversible. But what came out instead was a question she'd been carrying since she was 6 years old. "Why did you leave us? Why did you stay away?" William coughed, blood on his lips. "Because the world I lived in doesn't allow for families, for love, for anything soft or human. The people I did business with, the enemies I made, they would have killed you and your mother without hesitation if they knew you existed. So I made myself disappear from your lives before they could find you through me." His eyes were wet now, too. "I watched you grow up from a distance. Every birthday, every achievement, every moment I wanted to be there and couldn't. And it killed me every single day." Evelyn's voice shook. "You could have found another way. You could have walked away from that world, chosen us instead of the empire." William's laugh was bitter. "I tried. When your mother told me she was pregnant, I tried to leave. They made it very clear that leaving wasn't an option. So I stayed in, built power, became untouchable, so that one day when I was gone, you'd have resources to protect yourself. Everything I built, every dollar, every connection, it was insurance for you." "But I didn't want insurance," Evelyn whispered. "I wanted a father." William's face crumpled. "I know, and I failed you. I thought keeping you safe was the same as loving you. I thought if I could just make you powerful enough, strong enough, protected enough, it would make up for not being there. But watching you these last 5 years, seeing you give away the dirty money, testify against corruption, build something clean out of the mess I left you, I realized you were always strong enough. You didn't need me to make you powerful. You just needed me to be your dad." The words broke something in Evelyn's chest. She leaned closer, holding his hand in both of hers. "The Christmas party. You planned all of it." William nodded weakly. "I needed you to see Mark clearly, to understand what you were worth. You would have stayed with him forever, making yourself smaller, believing his cruelty was somehow your fault. I couldn't let you live that way, so I built a moment where the truth would be undeniable. And the inheritance? The test. Evelyn's voice was sharp, even through the tears. William closed his eyes. I needed to know if power would corrupt you. If you'd become like me, using money as a weapon, caring more about winning than being right. I needed to know if the daughter I'd protected from the shadows had the strength to choose integrity over wealth. His eyes opened again. And you did. You gave away billions. You restructured everything. You chose to be good, even when it cost you. He coughed again, harder. I was so proud, and so sorry that I couldn't tell you while pretending to be dead. Daniel appeared beside Evelyn, kneeling on William's other side. Sir, we need to move you. Get you to a hospital. William shook his head slightly. We both know I'm not making it to a hospital. This is where it ends. He looked at Daniel with something like affection. You were supposed to just report on her. Make sure she was using the power correctly. What happened? Daniel's voice was rough. I fell in love with her. I stopped being your man and became hers. I'm sorry I failed your mission. William's smile was genuine this time. You didn't fail. You did exactly what I hoped someone would do. You saw her for who she really was and chose her over everything else. That's not failure. That's what I should have done 32 years ago. He looked back at Evelyn. Will you forgive me? For the abandonment, the manipulation, for making your life a test you didn't ask to take. Evelyn was silent for a long moment. Around them, Kessler's team was securing the area, checking the bodies, making sure no one from the Dalton Syndicate would ever threaten her family again. In the distance, she could hear sirens. Someone had called the police. They had maybe 5 minutes before this quarry was swarming with questions she didn't want to answer. She looked at the man who was her father. Really looked at him and saw all the contradictions. The love and the control, the protection and the abandonment, the brilliant strategist and the emotionally broken man who thought keeping people safe meant keeping them away. I forgive you for leaving, Evelyn said finally. I understand why you thought you had to. I don't forgive you for manipulating my life from the shadows, for turning my pain into a test, for making Daniel lie to me, for thinking that control was the same as love. But her voice broke. I forgive you for today, for taking that bullet, for saving Catherine, for finally showing up when it mattered most. William's eyes closed in relief. That's more than I deserve. Evelyn squeezed his hand. You're my father. You'll always be more than you deserve and less than I needed. Both things are true. William laughed, then groaned in pain. You sound like your mother, sharp and honest and unwilling to let anyone off easy. God, I loved her. Why didn't you marry her? Evelyn had to know. If you loved her that much, why didn't you make it official? Give me your name. Give us the protection of being yours publicly. William's breathing was getting shallower. Because my enemies would have found you immediately. Catherine understood. She knew the sacrifice we were both making. She agreed to raise you alone, to take the money I sent, to never ask for more. And in return, I stayed away far enough to keep you invisible. It was the deal we made, and it destroyed us both. Evelyn thought about her mother, about the envelopes that arrived once a year, about the way Catherine's face had looked when she saw William across the street at Evelyn's graduation, about the locked box of unsent letters Evelyn had found after her mother died. Your mother wrote to you too, Evelyn said softly. Hundreds of letters she never sent. I found them after she died. Letters telling you about me, about our lives, about how much she missed you. Did you know? William's tears were flowing freely now. I wrote her too. Evelyn's breath caught. What? William nodded slightly. Every week for 32 years. Letters I never sent because I was afraid if I did, I'd break down and come back and get you both killed. I have boxes of them in New Zealand in a storage unit under a fake name. Every thought, every moment I wanted to share, every time I wanted to be there and couldn't. It's all there. Daniel knows where. He'll get them for you. Evelyn looked at Daniel. He nodded confirmation. I'll make sure you have everything. William coughed, and this time blood came up. Too much blood. Evelyn leaned closer. Dad, she said, using the word for the first time in her life. Don't leave me again. Not now. Not when I just found you. William's hand tightened in hers. I don't want to, but I don't think I get a choice this time. His voice was fading. Tell my granddaughters about me. The truth, the good and the bad. Don't make me a saint or a villain. Just tell them I love them even though I never got to meet them. Tell them their grandfather's last act was saving their sister. Let that be what they remember. I will, Evelyn promised. William looked at her one more time. You're extraordinary. You always were. You were extraordinary when you were invisible. And you're extraordinary now that the world can see you. Never forget that your power doesn't come from what I left you. It comes from who you chose to be. He took a rattling breath. I'm so proud to be your father, even if I didn't deserve the privilege. Then William Hayes closed his eyes, and his breathing stopped, and Evelyn felt his hand go limp in hers. She sat there in the dirt holding her father's body and cried. Not quietly, not with dignity. She sobbed like a child who'd lost her parent, which was exactly what she was. Daniel's arms came around her from behind, holding her while she broke, and she let him because she was so tired of being strong alone. Mark appeared with Catherine, who'd insisted on coming back, who'd somehow understood that Mommy needed her. Catherine's small hand touched Evelyn's face. Mommy, why are you sad? Evelyn pulled her daughter into her lap, held her close. Because someone very brave just saved you, baby, and now he's gone. Catherine looked at William's still form. The grandpa. Evelyn nodded. Yes, the grandpa you never got to meet. He loved you very much. Catherine was quiet for a moment. Then she said something that destroyed what was left of Evelyn's composure. I think I remember him from my dreams. A nice man who watched me sleep and said everything would be okay. Evelyn held her daughter tighter and wondered if William had somehow visited Catherine while she was being held, if his presence had comforted her, if love could cross distances and death and all the barriers people built between themselves and the people they cared about. The police arrived, then the FBI, then the media. The quarry became a crime scene, and Evelyn became the center of a story that would dominate headlines for months. Trillionaire heiress's father, revealed to be alive, dies saving granddaughter from kidnappers. The investigation uncovered everything: William's fake death, the Dalton syndicate's operations, the decades of manipulation and control and love expressed through protection instead of presence. Some people called William a hero. Others called him a criminal who'd gotten what he deserved. Evelyn called him neither. She called him complicated, which was the only honest word that fit. 3 months later, Evelyn stood in a cemetery in New Zealand where William was buried for real, this time under his real name, with a headstone that said simply, William Hayes, Father. Daniel stood beside her. So did Mark and Rachel and all 3 children. Noah and Lily had processed the news about their grandfather with the resilience of 12-year-olds who'd already survived one impossible situation and knew they could survive another. Catherine asked about him sometimes, wanted to know more about the grandpa from her dreams. And Evelyn told her the truth, that he loved her but made mistakes, that he saved her life but couldn't save his own, that people were complicated and love didn't always look the way you wanted it to. Daniel had given Evelyn the letters, boxes and boxes of them. Letters from William to Catherine, her mother. Letters from William to Evelyn. 32 years of words he'd never sent, thoughts he'd never shared, love he'd never expressed directly. Evelyn had read them all, crying through most of them, understanding her father more and hating him less, but still angry about all the years they'd lost. There were letters from her mother, too. Daniel had found those in a second storage unit because apparently Catherine had been doing the same thing, writing to William every week and never sending the letters because she was afraid to. 2 people who loved each other, living separate lives, writing words that never got read, sacrificing everything for a daughter who would have preferred having less money and more parents. Evelyn had made decisions. She'd restructured the empire into a trust controlled by an independent board. She'd resigned from active management. She'd moved out of the mansion into a normal house in a normal neighborhood and enrolled Noah, Lily, and Catherine in public school. She still had wealth, would always have wealth, but she'd stopped letting it define her. She'd become just Evelyn, a mother, a woman who'd survived impossible things and chose to build something kind with the aftermath. She and Daniel were together now officially. No more lies between them. He'd quit working for the Hayes Foundation and started a small law practice helping people navigate estate law, the kind of work that made a difference in individual lives instead of shaping nations. Mark and Rachel had become genuine co-parents, the kind of blended family that actually worked because everyone involved cared more about the children than their own egos. As Evelyn stood at her father's grave, she realized she'd been angry for so long she'd forgotten what it felt like to just be sad. To miss someone without resenting them. To love someone despite their failures. She knelt down and placed her hand on the headstone. "I forgive you," she said quietly. "Not for everything, but for enough. I forgive you for being human, for making mistakes, for loving me the only way you knew how, even though it wasn't the way I needed. And I forgive myself for being angry, for taking so long to understand, for wishing you'd been different instead of accepting who you actually were." Catherine tugged on her sleeve. "Mommy, can I talk to Grandpa, too?" Evelyn nodded. Catherine knelt beside her mother and said in her small, serious voice, "Hi, Grandpa. Thank you for saving me. I wish I could have known you when you weren't dying. But Mommy says you watched me grow up from far away, so maybe you kind of did know me. Anyway, I love you even though we never met. Is that okay?" Evelyn pulled her daughter close. "That's more than okay, baby. That's perfect." They stood together, mother and daughter, in the shadow of a man who'd built empires and destroyed relationships and ultimately given his life for a granddaughter he'd never held. And Evelyn realized this was the legacy that actually mattered. Not the money or the power or the Senate testimonies. Just this. A 5-year-old girl who'd been saved. A 12-year-old boy and girl who'd learned that people could change. A mother who'd gone from invisible to powerful to finally, blessedly, just human. 1 year after William Hayes died, Evelyn hosted the annual fundraiser for her foundation at the same hotel where the Christmas party had happened 6 years earlier. The ballroom looked different now, warmer, full of people who'd survived abuse, who'd escaped controlling relationships, who'd rebuilt their lives from nothing. Evelyn wore a simple dress, her mother's necklace, and stood in the center of the room instead of the back corner. Her children were beside her. Daniel held her hand. Mark and Rachel were there, too, because co-parenting meant showing up even when it wasn't your custody weekend. Evelyn gave a speech about her mother, Catherine, about invisible women, about choosing integrity over power, about the difference between being controlled and being loved. She talked about her father, too. Honestly, without excusing his failures or erasing his sacrifice. And she talked about the journey from that Christmas party to this moment. From humiliation to power to understanding that real strength wasn't about domination or wealth or making people afraid of you. Real strength was knowing when to forgive, when to walk away, when to hold on, when to let go. At the end of the speech, she looked toward the back corner where she'd stood 6 years ago, pregnant and humiliated and invisible, and saw a ghost of herself there. The woman she'd been, scared but enduring, hurt but dignified, powerless but not worthless. Evelyn nodded at her former self, acknowledging the journey, honoring the woman who'd survived long enough to become someone different. Then she turned back to her children, to the life she'd built with her own hands instead of the one she'd inherited, and smiled. Not the tired, apologetic smile she used to wear like armor, but a real smile, the kind that came from knowing you'd been broken and put yourself back together, and the cracks didn't make you weaker, they just made you yours. Catherine tugged on her sleeve. "Mommy, I'm hungry." Evelyn laughed. "Then let's get you some food, baby." They walked together toward the buffet, just a mother and her children, and no one watching would have known she was worth billions, or that she'd testified before Congress, or that her father had died saving her daughter's life. They would have just seen a family, which was exactly what Evelyn had fought so hard to become. Not a dynasty, not an empire. Just people who loved each other enough to show up, enough to forgive, enough to choose each other over everything else. And as the music played and the evening stretched into night, Evelyn Carter realized she'd finally answered the question that had haunted her since she was 6 years old, watching her mother take those cream-colored envelopes and never explain. The question wasn't whether her father had loved her. He had, in his broken, complicated, controlling way, he'd loved her desperately. The question was whether she could love herself enough to stop letting his absence or his presence or his legacy define who she was allowed to be. She could. She did. And that, more than any inheritance or revenge or transformation from invisible to powerful, was the real victory, the real end, the real beginning. Dear viewers, if you've made it all the way through Evelyn's journey, through 3 parts spanning 6 years of her life, through humiliation and power, loss and love, then you've witnessed something rare. This is the story of a woman who inherited everything and chose to keep only what mattered, who learned that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, that power without humanity is worthless, that those who control you sometimes believe they're protecting you, and that the only legacy worth leaving is one built on truth instead of secrets.